brutal. That over there. Turn the volume up. Beautiful. We want on freedom. Oh, right, we're back. Okie dokie. So we've obviously not seen me for a few days. Apologies for that. There's been some things outside of my control, which I've had to take care of. I've had a friend has had a bereavement, so I've been helping him out. So that's why I haven't been online the last few days. Now back to the sport. Now, obviously, we saw the third test between England and New Zealand in the rugby league, and that was a 34-0 walloping for England in that test. And this highlights the NRL Super League argument. What I noticed throughout the three-test series was some of the Super League players, especially some of the England forwards, even though England won the first two tests and won them very, very well. The first test was a very close encounter. Second test, they just dominated the second half and kept the discipline when they needed to. Was, I think, fitness levels. I think the third test, England just really looked a bit blowy. They didn't look up to pace. A lot of players were injured or suspended, so bringing in some of these fringe players, some of whom hadn't had a lot of game time at that level, so the experience level as well was highlighted, I think. And yes, England struggled in that third test and were hammered. And I thought New Zealand would want to come back and avoid a whitewash, and they did that. It just didn't seem to be any kind of. England just seemed to be they ran out of steam basically. They had nothing left for that third test. So yes, England won a test series, but they still cannot win a whitewash test series 3-0. And you've got to look at it in context, going, right, we've got more players going to the NRL now. A lot more players, another influx of players going to the NRL. And I can see those players in the Super League looking at the NRL going, is that an option to go to? The English Super League season is longer, plus you have the Challenge Cup as well, so there's more games played in the English game than the Australian game, so that's going to have an effect on some of these players having played a lot of rugby. I think the miles on the legs, I think, really got England in the end. That New Zealand side, all NRL based, they play less games, and it showed with I think in that third test their fitness, pure and simple. I constantly have this argument about the NRL versus Super League argument, which I think is better, and I do honestly think the NRL is the better competition. I honestly do. I think the fitness levels are better. I think the skill set's better. They're a bit more powerful at times, a bit more physical. The English Super League more slight of foot, but there are some big units in the Super League. I just think the pace of the game in Australia is that little bit quicker. The skill levels that little bit higher, and I think the fitness levels, as highlighted by the fact that firstly the Super League base players, they were also playing the Challenge Cup, as I said, so they play more games. They looked a little bit more leggy, a bit more tired, whereas the Rugby League NRL players from Australia, they seem to have coped better with the workload that Wayne Bennett's given them. And it's an argument that I've had several times on this channel. I think the NRL is just a better league. Obviously, the FA Cup first round has started. We've already seen some shocks. Yeovil going out. One of them, Cambridge United getting beaten 4-1. So we've seen a couple of FA Cup shocks already with non-league sides beating league sides. We've seen some managerial change again in the lower leagues. AFC Wimbledon sacked a manager. There's managers losing their jobs already. Again, the Premier League hasn't gone down the managerial sacking yet, so I don't know how long we go until the Premier League's first sacking takes place, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens about the end of November, middle of December. But it's going to be interesting. The fact that no sackings have taken place, yes, this time last year we already had several. I have noticed a lot of sackings in the lower leagues, but we'll see what happens with the managerial turnaround and chopping and changes of coaches and players. Obviously, Joe Cole's retired today, age 37. I would say not a completely unfulfilled career, but he didn't always live up to the potential that he had as a younger player at West Ham. He did have a successful spell at Chelsea, but sort of fizzled out towards the end of his career. Post 2010, he didn't seem to be the same player. Injuries, I think, held him back a little bit. But he will be remembered for that goal in the World Cup in 2006 in Germany, which was a brilliant piece of play against Sweden in the group stages. That was one of the best goals of the tournament, one of the best goals of World Cup football of all time. So, there we go. Yes, back to Invicta and the fact they still can't get a win. I fear that, yes, in the short term, they've got the money now to get through for now. They will obviously possibly further fundraising as the years the year goes on. But again, it's because I've looked on elite prospects. I've looked at their team, what they've got left. They are losing players. They've lost, I think, 5 players have left the team this season. And at the end of the day, if you can't retain star players or get those players in that want to contribute even during the tough times, you're not going to be able to get out of those tough times. So we'll have to see what happens. They've obviously got the funding sorted, and yeah, they were close to a shock win. It didn't come off, but I can see them winning some games. It's just getting that first win. It's just when it happens, and then going from there. What teams do I support? I have a video of that on my other sport playlist on the channel. So at the end of the day, I've got several of the teams that I support up on a video. So if you want to check that out, it explains why I follow them and how long I followed them for. Hello Water Bowl. That's an interesting name. I suppose that's a very apt name for a sports live stream. So I think hello. I wouldn't say Swindon have had the worst week. I think Bracknell didn't have a great week either. 1 point out of 4, losing on shootout to Streatham and then going to Peterborough and losing 4-2. But it is what it is. You're not going to win every game. I say that to any sports fan. Any team you have is not going to go a whole season unbeaten. I think that's something that people have to, be aware of as fans. If they expect success because of players that have been brought in or coaches they have or the strength of opposition, then they're underestimating the opposition's players, and they take things for granted. I think we've seen that from various teams. They've taken opposition teams for granted. Yes, Scunthorpe have survived and got through to the next round. I think already we've seen league sides get knocked out of the FA Cup already, and there have been a few minor shocks, but there's no real big clubs in at this level, unless you're counting some of the League One clubs that have been in the Premier League, like Sunderland, in recent times. But there could be some interesting non-league and lower league runs. We've got second round coming up in a couple of weeks, then the third round, and that's when the Premier League and Championship clubs join the tournament and join the competition. I'm hoping that the FA Cup is taken more seriously by a lot more of the Premier League and Championship clubs this year, especially some of the Premier League clubs. It's a great way to gain momentum. It's a great way to get some wins and get some confidence and to blood some players as well. But I do hope that some of the mid-table teams take it more seriously this season than they have in previous years. Okay, so it's an interesting one. I mean, you're not going to win every game, and as I say, it's all about the long-term goal, the long-term projections, and you're not going to win every game. And I do think that there are one or two of the former National League sides that are more competitive, and there are those like Invicta who haven't got a win yet. And I think if we look at British ice hockey as a whole and as an entity at the moment, there is a live game on Free Sports tomorrow night, which I might be able to watch. So we'll see. So there's a live game on Free Sports tomorrow night, and then you've got that TV deal for the Elite League. Then you have to look at the National League, and we have to look at the situation that is currently going on for some teams. Money is tight. Some teams are struggling financially to be able to ice team. That's why Cardiff don't have a team in the Division 1 South this year, because they couldn't get enough players to commit to the season. The teams that are well run and the teams that have played in the former EPIHL are better teams. The few teams that are outplaying some of these former EPIHL teams have recruited well, and they've got a bit of backing behind them now. I can see at some point within at the end of this season the league structure changing it again. Now, this is what I think we need to avoid. We need to find a way to keep all the levels of hockey in this country, be it fully professional at the Elite League, semi-professional with some professional players and some semi-pro players at the National League Division 1 level, Division 2. We need to have some consistency. So if we bring back the EPIHL, I think that's a good stepping stone for players. It worked very, very successfully for over a decade. And of course, we just had that issue with Manchester Phoenix going out of business. If Manchester Phoenix had managed to survive and got through another year, things might have been completely different. But that's how it ended up. The Elite League has a responsibility as well to support the lower level of the game, because that's where a lot of their prospect players come from. There's a lot of players that are on two-way contracts that get snapped up. Look at Josh Tetlow, for example, as a Bracknell player, developed in the former EPIHL, and then obviously played the initial season last year in this restructured National League format, and then goes up on a two-way contract and plays a lot of games for Nottingham, and he's stayed full time with the Nottingham Panthers going forward. Now, whether or not he comes back down, or there's a change of structure which may suit some players more, we shall see. But I think it's weird. I've not been on YouTube now for about 3-4 days, so I'm a little bit out of sync with some of the stuff that's going on. There's been, because I've had to help out with a friend at his place, a house sit for him, so I haven't had the internet. But it is interesting. And looking at Bracknell's weekend with that overtime, the shootout loss to Streatham, the refereeing decisions were perplexing for both sides. Yes, we've seen Bracknell players get into the under-20 squad before. We've seen Swindon players, and I think there are some good players playing in the National League that I think belong in a level above, but maybe not quite at elite league level just yet in their development. There are those who played in the elite league who maybe have lost a step because of age, or maybe now that the skill level of the elite league has just kicked on a little bit, will again be suited to like a former EPIHL kind of level to play in. And with teams like Basingstoke struggling to keep a rink going, they have their meeting tomorrow, so we find out tomorrow what the future of the Basingstoke Bison is. And with Invicta having to crowdfund, it's not all beds of roses. There's a lot of uncertainty every season with British Ice Hockey. What's going to happen next year? We need to figure out a way to get rid of that uncertainty for teams and supporters and players, because if the sport is to continue to grow and be a healthy sport and well supported sport, it needs some kind of consistency and structure. And the structures keep changing too much. Again, this is why Swindon are a very decent side, is because they have recruited well, and they have a very stable organisation. They have a very stable structures within the team and within the fan base and the club itself. And this is why they are a reasonably successful side. They have kept a good core together. They've recruited well. They develop young players very, very well. Some players feel happy at that second tier level. Other players obviously find Swindon a very good place to develop and take that next step. And they are, Swindon's renowned for good youth camps and good youth development. And without teams like Swindon at lower levels that give that stepping stone to young players to get some game experience and develop their skills and move on to the next level, the sport doesn't succeed. And moving forward, players like Sam Jones, who've got clearly that ability to play another level up. I mean, that's what the elite league's for. That's what we need to have a strong, very strong elite league. But we need to work out a way where, if we have like an EPIHL kind of structure, those two-way contracts work really well, where they can assign players. I think the step up from National League to that step up. But yes, the second team aren't doing well, and you can definitely say that they've had a rough start to the season. That doesn't mean that these young players aren't got the skill set and won't necessarily get that two-way call up, because over the years, and this is consistently, it's not just this season, it's consistently, good young players have come through Swindon at some point, or played at Swindon at some point. You can see the main team have got a good core there. Now, if a season or two down the line, the struggles of the backup team and some of those younger players or those reserve players may have to fill in and they're not quite as good, okay, you've had a good 10, 15 years of stability, and of course, whatever it may be. But I think that could be down to a variety of factors. Most of the better players in the hockey club play for the main team. Obviously, when players are injured or suspended, the main team will pinch players from the second team. And I think that's how a backup squad works in sport. It's not always fair to that team in that division they're playing in, but those players get that opportunity to play at that higher level and then get scouted, get seen. I've seen a fair few hockey scouts at games from the Elite League, at Bracknell games. Yes, I've seen them. So it's just giving that young player that opportunity of 1, 2 games, 3 games. If he can impress, he may get a permanent call-up. We've seen it in Brattle with Zach Milton getting a permanent position now on the Brattle roster. We saw it last year, some players on two-way contracts who played very, very well. Now, that does affect the team below when some of the better players are taken out of that team to play in the team above. So it does sometimes have a knock-on effect. But the structures are changing and have changed. And I wouldn't be surprised if the structures change again. Right, what have we got here? Worst injury I've ever had. Oh God, I've had a few. You know, I've had a couple of neck and shoulder and like a few concussions. Lewis Taylor, I haven't seen enough of him to really pass judgment on a player that I haven't seen enough of. Plain and simple. I haven't been to enough swinging games, and Swindon obviously play players regularly, but it's not as if we play every weekend. I mean, I don't have enough. I want to say I haven't got enough knowledge on him to really give an honest opinion. Scouts are very, very kind of giveaway because they're sort of possibly wearing the team tracksuit tops. I've seen a couple of scouts from North America. I have seen elite league scouts. They will be wearing club colours in some way, be it a club tie or a jacket. And they normally sit up in the executives box, or they could have been invited down. You never know. There are scouts at games up in another country. I have seen a couple. It is interesting when you see players get scouted. I've actually had some sit behind me last season. I had some scouts sit behind me, and I could hear them conversing about the players they'd seen on the ice, and they clearly were North American. Whether they were looking at expanding the British talent pool in North America, I don't know. I am aware that players like Sam Jones have, and Ryan Sutton have taken some time to play at various points in their career abroad. In the youth level, overseas born players. But no, I have seen scouts at games. When I was at school, we had scouts watching our rugby and football cricket teams. I think you get to know once you've been around people who have ended up playing professional sport, which I have. I've had some schoolmates who've gone on to play professional cricket and professional rugby union. It's you get to tell what scouts look like. You honestly do. When you guys are batting as many Brattle games as I do, I know a lot of the regulars, a lot of the season ticket holders. When you see that new face that you haven't seen before, you can tell they're a scout. I've sat in front of some scouts before, and it was interesting listening to their conversation about the notes they're taking, what they feel on certain players, what team they're actually scouting, if they're scouting the Brattle team or the opposition team, and looking at some of the players. How do I think Japan will do next season's World Cup? Well, they're the hosts, so that automatically gives the players, I think, a lift. I think I don't know how well they'll do. I would say quarterfinals at a maximum. They're not quite ready to go deep into the tournament yet as a nation, but I think this World Cup can be used to help develop the game further in Japan. It's a debating point whether some of the lower ranked tier one or upper ranked tier two nations get the support that say the All Blacks and England do. There is money issues within rugby union. That's a point of debate that we could have. It is the money side of rugby union and rugby league, for that matter, compared to sports like football, where there's more money around. I wouldn't say Japan are a write-off. I think, yes, 3 years ago they had a very, very good tournament and rightly deserve the plaudits they got, especially for that South Africa win, how they played. It hasn't always been rosy since then. They've had, obviously, Eddie Jones is now England coach. It's a bit of a coaching change in the Japan setup, but their Super Rugby franchise is improving. I think the quality level is improving. There is already a well-established domestic league there as well below the Super Rugby, which is professional. I honestly do think it's going to be a good tournament. Celtic and the Scottish Premiership and Scottish football. I think Celtic's slow start will still be a cause of concern. and it's going to be interesting to see how their European campaign playing that modern football does affect them going forward, because Hearts don't have that, and Hibs don't have that. Kilmarnock, Rangers do, obviously. Livingston don't. So if you look at the top half of the Scottish table, there are a fair few teams that don't have European commitments, and then you have Rangers and Celtic. So it will be interesting to see what happens going forward with Celtic. It's going to be interesting. I think um, the slow start highlighted a lot of issues Celtic have. Now, if they panic buying the transfer window, that could make the situation worse. Just because they've gone on a good run doesn't mean that if they were to continue this kind of form, that other teams wouldn't pick their form up. So it's going to be interesting to see how Celtic approach the transfer window, at least, and how long Brendan Rodgers actually remains their manager. Yes, when we got clipboard you've never seen before, they probably had invited a scout to come down, or someone on some kind of crossover between sports, maybe taking notes on how, for a university dissertation, for example. Semi-pro and pro sports are really interesting. You will see some of the low levels of sport, university students who are doing sports science or sports media or marketing, or some kind of sports related course, will write to some of their local sports teams and be given access to look at and ask players, about training methods, and look at how different coaches coach and various things. That you do pick up these things. The more people go to games, the more they pick up on things like this, where they see someone they haven't seen before on the bench or in the crowd, who's a scout or doing some research. It could be a research for it's semi-professional. So there are some professional players and there's some semi-professional players where they are paid a contract, but it's not their main form of income. So it's a mix in D1. But yes, when you've got someone like that taking notes and looking, it could be a media reporter doing a journalist kind of piece. It could be a variety of things. It depends on the level of the sport. It depends on what kind of notes they're taking. But I have seen scouts at games, and Alexander Pato, well, his stock has declined since he burst through at AC Milan. Pato is a good player, bit of a playboy mind. I think Alexander Pato is the Brazilian version of Joe Cole. Really skillful, technically brilliant, but tactically hopeless. I think that's what he's technically brilliant. I think tactically, however, does he suit certain formations more than others? Is it just let him have a free roam? Pato hasn't lived up to the potential he could have had. He could have a breakout season and be a star player, but he hasn't quite lived up to the potential that he could have. So we shall see what happens with him. It is interesting, though, looking at some of these players that 5-6 years ago everyone was talking about, and now they're not. Like Giuseppe Rossi about a decade ago, very similar to Pato, in build, in skill set, in style of play. I think he was playing for Villarreal or Valencia, got relegated with them. Had a few injuries, never really lived up to expectations. Could have played for the US as well, decided to play for Italy. This is just after their World Cup when he burst on the scene when he was a teenager, never fulfilled his potential. Pato is another player, Joe Cole. There are some of these players that are smaller in height and stature, more stocky build, very good technically, very good spatial awareness, technical ability, but it's the tactical side of the game which lets them down, or possibly their fitness is a concern, or whatever it may be. That's interesting that a county's got all its clubs into the second round. I didn't know that. Freddie Adu, God, that's going back some. There have been a couple of good American players over the years. The issue with the North American game is got the MLS is actually not governed by the federation. It's a franchise league, not a club-led league with the governing body having the final say on a lot of things, and the structure of the MLS is a lot different to European leagues, where obviously the money is and the players want to go. And again, South American league, get a higher quality South American leagues, and a lot of American players are actually based in Europe, or were. They're not developing that youth player they were a decade, 2 decades ago. So the shine of World Cup '94 has finally worn off. The MLS has gone on this massive expansion program over the last 10 years. David Beckham's MLS franchise is getting that step closer to getting a stadium built. You know, the game is improving in the MLS standard, yes. But there is a youth level development standard, and the levels below the MLS aren't keeping pace with this rapid growth in the sport. So it'd be interesting to see if there'll be a next batch of really good American and Canadian. Let's not forget Pesca Solido, who played for Derby. Let's not forget some of the Canadians who played. It will be interesting to see, firstly, how big the MLS will get. Will it be able to compete with team leagues like the NBA? I'm not a big NBA fan. I do apologise if I don't cover it enough, but so we'll see. If the MLS can catch up to the NBA and then the NHL and the NFL and the Major League Baseball over the next 5-10 years with revenues. I don't know. If BT Sport are losing rights, that's not necessarily a good result for Scottish football, because there's still contracts in place where they do show games. They are also sponsoring rugby union a lot as well in Scotland. So if BT Sport was to completely go down the toilet, it would have some knock-on effects that would affect not only football but all sports in Scotland. I think BT Sport has got less than a couple of years. It's not on the same playing field as the other sports channels. It's really not. Eurosport, yeah, okay, you have to pay for it now. You can get it on a Sky subscription where you don't have to pay for the channel, but if it were freebie, you have to pay for it. Eurosport, been going for decades. Premier Sports have realised we'll put a free channel in Free Sports, which I've been watching the last couple of days at my mate's house and really enjoyed what they're showing. I know there's a lot of repeats of European football and the NHL, but they do show the Swedish Hockey League live games. They show the KHL live games. So the sports that I like, Free Sports, is showing, which is great. So it is accessible. BT Sports never really got off the ground. They didn't have the greatest of launches. BT customers were expecting to get it free. That didn't work out. It's losing money. I think the production values are really poor. And it seems that the people who set up BT Sport learned nothing from ITV Sports' failure and Settanta's failure by going for the lesser games, the lesser leagues. I would say Murdoch is laughing all the way to the bank, because he's lost full control of Sky to Comcast, so he's also lost out. Murdoch's seen off a lot of rivals, but he saw off himself in the end, because of the actions of some of his companies and some of his journalists that he employs over the last decade or so, bringing into disrepute. Murdoch himself, there are suspicions of corrupt dealings and a variety of allegations against Murdoch and his cronies. I can see Sky having to restructure how they sell sports to the wider public here in the UK and the rest of Europe. I can see Sky basically having to change how they structure television rights and access to those games and to those pay-per-views. I think there's going to be a lot more free-to-air sport coming our way very, very soon. I do think that. I think BT Sports should have always been free-to-air. That would have been more of a kick in the teeth to Sky Sports. Do I support an NBA team? No, I don't. Basketball is not one of my favourite sports. I did play at school, didn't really enjoy it. Because I didn't enjoy playing it, I never really also got to enjoy watching it, because it just was one of those minor sports we had after a while we had a choice if we wanted to play or not, and I chose not to play, which meant I didn't get to watch, because I was doing rugby, football, cricket, other sports. I wasn't focusing on a sport that I didn't enjoy playing. Now, that's not to say basketball's a bad sport, but I'm not really a basketball fan. It's just a type of sport. Firstly, I'm not the tallest. I'm a shade. We're talking millimeters under 6 foot. So for me, size was a bit of an issue. When I was younger, I wasn't always the tallest. I had a bit of a growth spurt when I was early teenage years. You know, But no, I never really got into it. Do I think the FA will ever change? I think football as a whole, as in the structural governance, needs to change. Yes, but we've seen with the FIFA and UEFA scandals, not much has really happened. Um, we've seen with the mess that the Scottish FA got themselves in with the League Cup semi-finals in Scotland. That was a mess. We've seen with the fate of the Wembley sale that there are deep concerns and divisions within football. Um, the FA has a real rocky relationship with the Premier League and the Football League. The EFL have a rocky relationship with some of the member clubs and fans. The Premier League is governance there, this financial fair play mess that clearly has been, brought back into the spotlight because of Man City and PSG and because there's a possibility of wrongdoing. There is a lot that I am concerned about within the FA. The structures do need to change. A government report even says the structures of the FA need to change. There was a parliamentary inquiry into the Eni Aluko, Mark Sampson racism scandal, and that did highlight a lot of structural issues within the Football Association here in England. But sports governing bodies, football is not immune from this, but sports governing bodies around the world, I think a lot of them need structural change. Chris Sutton, as a player, yeah, I enjoyed him at club level because he's obviously a Blackburn legend, but he snubbed England, which I think was the wrong thing to do. And his managerial career was a failure with Lincoln City because he got them relegated out of the Football League. He is a controversial character. As a player, he was very, very good. I think his mistake was turning his nose up at playing in a friendly. That's basically, I think, what damaged his reputation the first time round was basically saying, "No, I'm not playing this friendly." So I don't know if it was Hoddle or what or Sir Bobby Robson, the England manager at the time, Terry Venables. I can't remember which manager it was. One of those three basically told him to do one. You're not going to play for England again. Um, and I think that was a blight on his career. I understand he does speak his mind, but sometimes some of his views are completely off left field. They make no sense. But it's up to what you as a sports fan want to see. If you just want to see, I think Charlie Austin's little rant at the weekend for Southampton was brilliant because he was telling the truth. And there's like going, what about the other side? Well, yeah, I think Mark Hughes has basically got to a point now where he's told his players, we're not going to media coach you. We're going to let you be yourselves. Let's have some personality. And Charlie Austin, he will get a fine and possibly a suspension from the FA for speaking his mind, which is total truth. The issue within football is they're looking at VAR again. And I think Charlie Austin's comments bringing that into the spotlight and the way he's basically said what he said, and it is funny, but at the same time it's serious. Is the why is it that football's taken so long to bring in technology where other sports are decades ahead, years and decades ahead? It's really bizarre their lack of use of the tech and resistance to it, and that's another thing that's holding. I think football back in some areas is its resistance to change, which is what it's needed. Especially when it comes in a positive. I don't know why they're resisting using VAR. I really do not understand why. If the Portuguese league are doing it, I can't see why English football isn't doing it at the top level because it is starting to become an embarrassment now. We've seen a lot of poor calls by officials. I'm going to mention something about the officials actually in sport. If the technology is there and it's been proven to work in the World Cup, for the most part, there were some teething issues. If there is a technical option there, the FA or UEFA or whatever governing body is in charge of that level of football needs to go, right, it's going. If we can use, and there's enough money for the game, the sport itself, to install at a lower league club so those lower league clubs don't have to have the financial hit of installing it themselves because this is where the amount of money in football can do something good. Yes, Rebecca Advington. She's had a lot of social media abuse at times for her views and her and how she looks as well, which I think is pretty disgusting. I do think apart from the European or World Championships or the Olympics, swimming doesn't get a lot of coverage. Again, it's a weird one because a lot of these Olympic sports don't get the coverage outside of an Olympic or World Championship or European Championship tournament. They really don't. But how much sports coverage can you give every sport? There's only a limited amount of channel networks available. Hopefully that will change with the demise of BT Sport. We can get some more free-to-air sports channels because I do think free sports is working. I think I would date Rebecca Addington. Oh yes, she is attractive. I have no idea how people can find her. But this is the modern age we live in with social media. It's so easy to insult and abuse people. And but no, Rebecca Addington, she is very very intelligent. And she is multi medal winning. One of the best swimmers this country's ever produced. Top of her game for a while. She's one of the best swimmers in the world for a period of time. Um, I think her opinion is valid because she's been an Olympic medalist. She's been a World Championship medalist. She's won golds, bronzes, and silvers, or whatever it is. She's one of the most successful British swimmers ever. I do think, yes, her input and this is where ex sportsmen can have an input, and women, sportsmen and women, in how a sport can evolve and be better. This is where we need to keep. Instead of her doing her commentary and her media commitments, this is where we need people like Rebecca Addington to stay involved in the sport in a governance side. For those younger athletes coming through in that particular sport. And Mark Foster is brilliant. One of the world's best ever swimmers. Not at the Olympic level, but at World Championship level. So he got the cycle wrong. He was very good in the World Championships, cracking the Olympics because the cycle didn't work for him. He just couldn't get him set for an Olympic World Championship cycle. He managed to do it well in the World Championships, never really well in the Olympics. It's just mad with Mark Foster. But again, these two individuals are two of the individuals that the sport needs to actually put some proposals towards TV companies going, why are you not? Why are you not covering our sport? Why are you not giving the press coverage or the TV rights for competitions? Um, they need to make the argument for more funding because these are two of the most successful swimmers we've ever had over the last 25, 30 years. These are world champions and Olympic medalists, and they've competed at the highest level. So it is very vitally important that, yes, Rebecca Addington, Mark Foster. There are a few others whose names, Adam Peaty, obviously still competing, but there are a few others who've been at the top level for a while or have in the past competed at the top level. Yeah, we do need to have their input. It is vital for a sport to progress with the input of some of the ex athletes who have competed in that sport. Absolutely. Um, I think they are right saying that there is an issue with coverage, but it's about asking yourself, right, how can you market this sport to get that casual fan to want to go down and watch a swim event, watch a swim meet? How can you encourage that company or that wealthy individual to invest and sponsor an athlete or a competition? Um, you know, a lot of Olympic and World Champion swimmers come through university systems. Um, there's not a lot of money in the sport as much as you think. Um, they do rely a lot on donations and to get their funding and personal sponsorships. And some of the who reach the top level do get that personal sponsor. Let's say Nike or Speedo will sponsor them. But again, there's not a lot of money in it. So that's another concern to look at is where the funds come from so you can get to that elite level. I do honestly think though that yes, keeping Addington and Mark Foster involved in some way with making sure that the sport doesn't get ignored and keep raising these issues is vitally important um, to the future development of the sport and how to get more people involved in it. This is crucial because we are having an issue with a health crisis in our youth. There is an obesity crisis. Yes, I will admit I have spent a lot of the last couple of days watching Two Dogs and house sitting for a friend, and therefore not necessarily being the most active person. I have been watching a lot of TV and playing a lot of video games. But I will say this: every 3 hours I've got to walk those dogs. So I'm doing some kind of physical activity. Now, the issue we have is there's not enough facilities for young people to necessarily go down that youth club and play that five-a-side football tournament. There's not enough of these youth facilities around. There is this kind of attitude of now the video games are getting more and more popular with these esports and Fortnite and things like GTA, things like that. They're not getting active. They're not going out. They're not, you know, having a kick about down the park, partly because the parks have been sold off, but we can debate that as much as you want. But I think getting ex-sportsmen involved and keeping them involved in the conversation, in the dialogue, is more vital than having some pen pusher, middle class, oh, I think she's married, but yeah, I would. I really. Oh. Think of the power of those thighs. No, Rebecca Addington, though, but she does make a good point about the lack of coverage, but at the same time, is there the interest from the fan base as well? You've got to look at what sports fans in this country like and around the world. What sports they like, and they normally like more team sports. It's a trend. Team sports get more coverage and more fans than individualistic sports. Team sports are more professional and less relying on donations and charity and trying to find that individual sponsor. Wages are far more, regulated. Prize money varies all over the place in the individual sports like tennis and swimming and some of the cycling disciplines. So it's really interesting. But I think to keep Rebecca Adlington, and yes, I would date her as well, and Mark Foster, and keeping their voices being heard, and they are a big presence with the TV coverage when there is TV coverage. They're commentating, they're dissecting what swimmers are doing, they're going down and they're interviewing these swimmers as they come out of the pool. They're asking the right questions. They are a very, very important voice for the sport in this country. But you have to ask the question: how popular is swimming as a viewer sport, not as participation necessarily, but as a viewer sport. Roland Garros, yeah, the French Open. It is on free-to-air coverage, much like Wimbledon. It's on ITV and ITV4. I think it would be great to have the Australian and the US Opens also on free-to-air TV, but that's just not the case. It's the way the TV rights work in this country. There has to be a balance. So I think one's on the US Opens on Amazon, Amazon Prime via the Amazon Prime Fire Stick, which I don't like, and their coverage is appalling. It's Amazon. Sky get the Australian because of Murdoch. The French get ITV because of the Tour de France link as well. The ITV have a very good working relationship with French sport. The BBC get Wimbledon. So I think that's kind of fair. It would be nice to see them all on free to air, but it's just not going to happen, is it? But again, you have to ask why. Is it because Nadal wins every year in Roland Garros? Probably. It's a difficult one because at the time Roland Garros was taking part this year, the World Cup was on in football, so there was a clash of big sporting events. Roland Garros and the World Cup were on at the same time. More people watched the football than watched the tennis. It just happened to be that year where there was another big sporting tournament going on, and so that's I think that's what's caused that slight drop in viewing numbers this year. Of course, 2 years ago, the Euros are in France, so again clashing at the same time. I do think though that team sports regularly get more viewers when it comes to big tournaments or sponsorships, pay, fans actually in the arenas and in the stadiums watching team sports. They seem to do a lot better. There is more money in team sports because there's more places to put your sponsorship. If you've got like football, that's 11 players per team, starting plus the bench, plus the managers, plus the stadium. That's a lot of sponsorship space you can whack on there. I don't think the season World Cup was a huge disappointment as such. There were some very, very good games. There was very, very good goals. Only one goalless draw in the whole tournament. So goal scoring was up. Goal scoring was up. Amount of shots was up. It was a far more open tournament than people expected from some teams. Some teams actually gave it a go. Some teams were just walloped. I felt it was a good tournament. I know they were experimenting with VAR, and that was a controversial experiment. For the most part, it worked. There were a lot of teething issues, but you're going to expect that with a new technology and a new system. I didn't think it was actually the worst World Cup I've ever seen. I think the worst World Cup I've ever seen was either South Africa in 2010 or USA 94 for quality. They were atrociously poor World Cups. 2006, I think, was one of my favourites as well. I would say 2016 in Brazil was quite a good tournament. Not for England fans, but as a footballing fan, to see that tournament was quite an entertaining tournament to watch. 4 years ago, I definitely enjoyed the World Cup, and in 2014, I enjoyed it. 2016, that was the Olympics. But I didn't think this was a bad tournament. The weather held up remarkably well. There was very little rain, which was also a bad thing. I wouldn't mind seeing a thunderstorm and seeing how players would have coped with heavier rain in Russian thunderstorms, but the weather held up. Very hot conditions. All European last four, all European final, which is one of the few predictions I actually got right. Oddly, there are things to work on for future tournaments. I think the style of football is evolving constantly. The style of football is evolving constantly. They're bringing these rule variations. They keep changing the offside rules. They're experimenting with VAR around the world. They've got goal line tech now at these major tournaments. Football is evolving, but I think the way it's evolving is not necessarily in the right way. I do think the skill level is lower now than what it was 20, 30 years ago. I honestly believe the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s, the skill level of football players was higher. The money was less, but the skill level, I honestly do think there's a lot of generic players now. They're overcoached. I think the coaching's gone too far. I think you need to I think coach them in defence, not attack. Let them flow and attack. Let them think on their feet. Release the shackles of rigid formations. Just let them, you know. Although the Scottish side in the 70s and 80s was actually very, very good. Regularly qualified for tournaments. Had some good games, had some bad defeats, had some good games. I think it's the amount of individual players you had that were quality, didn't necessarily gel as a team. You can have a team full of superstars and be crap. You've got to look at the NHL in pre-salary cap period. The Rangers, the Maple Leafs, two of the biggest teams in North American ice hockey, two of the wealthiest teams, signed loads of players on free agency contracts, pickups. Some of these big superstar players who may have won a Stanley Cup before in that time frame. In the build-up to the 2004 lockout, one Stanley Cup for the Rangers, and that was basically with the Edmonton Oilers transferred to New York because the Oilers ran out of money and couldn't afford to pay them. No Stanley Cups for Toronto. Both teams post 94, 95 for a good decade or so were crap. Couldn't win anything. So it's all well and good having the money and having all these star players, but if you cannot gel as a team, it undoes all the hard work of all that skill that you have at individual level. There's individualism and then there's a team ethic. And you could have a team of individuals and they will lose. A team of players will win. So I think that's possibly where Scotland went wrong, was they had all these really individually great players who could not gel as a team. Whereas look at Leicester a couple of seasons ago in the Premier League. One or two really good players. Most of the players pretty solid, nothing spectacular. Gel well as a team, win the title. It comes down to a lot of how do I put it? It comes down to work ethic. Some of these superstar players are actually exceptionally lazy. Look at Paul Pogba, exceptionally lazy player. Somehow managed to win a World Cup and the Europa League in there, but it's basically an average player. He has a bit of skill, and then the attack on his day can be brilliant, but he's too inconsistent. He's very argumentative, very, very moody, petulant, overpaid, flatters to deceive a lot of the time. But that sounds like half the Man United squad, to be honest. But no, yes, you can say, oh, you had a very, very talented squad, and you did. And for 20 years, Scotland regularly produced brilliant players year on year. Scottish football regularly had, no, I've cut my leg open. Regularly had 4 or 5, 6 young players coming through. And then you look at the side, yeah, really, really good side. But for some reason, it didn't quite transpire to be world class. And that's because you had a team of individuals, not a team of players. Plain and simple. But we could debate. Let me just get my laptop. That's better. Oh shit! Broke my vape. Oh dear. Second vape in a week. I might have drawn. But no, it's a difficult one. I wouldn't say I wouldn't necessarily say Scotland. I don't know what it is with Scotland. They had 2-3 good decades of producing brilliant players, and then in the mid-90s that stopped and stopped suddenly. Something's happened where the quality level in Scottish football has just done that. And that's partly to do with the competitiveness of Scottish football, which is why I think it was really important that Aberdeen or Hibs or Hearts or even Livingston or Kilmarnock are really random. They do well. And Rangers and Celtic don't necessarily win the league every year. I think that's what Scottish football needs, is that new team to get a name on a trophy, lift some silverware, break up the monotony of Celtic for the last decade and Rangers for the decade before, and mix it up a bit, because that is more damaging, I think, for the league, not to have competition. It really is, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how. Oh yeah, because it's a rivalry of nations that doesn't matter what sport you play. It doesn't matter who's the better of the two sides. There is hatred there. There is a rivalry there. It really is a heated rivalry between two constituent parts of the UK. Doesn't matter if it's football, rugby union, rugby league, cricket, because we've seen Scotland win a one-day international against England this year. It doesn't matter what sport it is that you put an England All-Star 11 or a Scottish All-Star 11 in a charity match, they'll kill each other. I think rugby, we play Scotland every year as Englishmen in the Six Nations, whereas in football, it's not as regular as it could be. And it used to be a regular occurrence, now it's not. But again, it's a shame because obviously Scottish and English clubs haven't met as much in the European football side of things as they could as well, which is a shame because there was some spicy encounters in the 80s and the 90s in European football between English and Scottish clubs that were really spicy and filled with intent. Rugby union, there's more, matches between English and Scottish clubs in the European rugby and how that's sorted out. And again, the international level, it's more regular. But yeah, no, it's a lot tighter because it's one of the oldest. It's, I think, the oldest international in football. It's like the first ever international football match was England Scotland. So they played a lot more games than some other countries in that head-to-head comparison. But no, the records are remarkably even, and it's obviously when they play each other, it's a one-off game. Hi, are you British, Irish, or just a normal person? What's that? What question is that? I have a British passport with Irish heritage. Does that make you happy? And what is a normal person? So you're just a bit of a dick, aren't you? So yeah, you can fuck off. Bye bye. Bye, Pat Hectic. You had to be a mong. I have no sympathy for trolls. We get one troll. We get one troll minimum per live stream now. It's part of the course, isn't it? No, I do think that the England Scotland rivalry and it, it's it is heated and there is history to it, and there have been some very unsavoury incidents in a variety of sports when it comes to England and Scotland. I will say that. We've seen, especially rugby union and football, we've seen some very unsavoury incidents. Rugby league, not so much, because they don't really play as much, because Scotland aren't really on the same level in development and having players available. So this is sort of two-tier system in rugby league. But we have seen some unsavoury moments on and off the field between the two sides. But you can definitely, it doesn't matter where the teams are in their development or what level they are at, when they play each other, both up their games. If both teams are on a bit of wobbly form, they're not doing well. There's issues about, qualify for this tournament, that tournament, but it's a friendly or it's a qualifier. There is intent there. It doesn't matter. All the form goes out the window and they go for each other, especially in rugby. I think rugby more so than football. We see, England, Scotland every year in the Six Nations. It doesn't matter what's gone on the test before. It doesn't matter what's happened in the previous 10 tests that both sides have played. On that day, all form goes out the window, team plan goes out the window. And as we saw in the Six Nations, Scotland, I think, had better discipline than England. There was that bust up in the tunnel between Farrell and a couple of the Scottish players, which I think was unnecessary, and it actually backfired on England. It shouldn't matter. It's an injury. It'd be a shame to see rivalries like that disappear. But that's the risk I think we have in modern sport. Is I think the over commercialisation has sort of taken some of that fun out of sport in some sports. And if we go back to the Rebecca Adlington thing, both Mark Foster and Rebecca Adlington are English. The university swimming system is important. They both got involved in university swim teams. They were youth swimmers. The issue with her argument that they're not getting the press coverage, I would agree. Yes, they're not getting the press coverage yet. But at the moment, there isn't, apart from Adam Peaty, there isn't really a British swimmer who's like an Ian Thorpe of Australia or what's his name from America. There's a couple of American swimmers who Phelps from America. There isn't quite that superstar kind of athlete who will draw the crowds in, and gather the interest in this country. Now, that's not to say there aren't swimming fans up and down this country, but it's it could get more TV coverage. There could be more TV rights. There could be a bit more prize money for competitions. There could be more sponsorship. Absolutely. But that's for UK swimming to look at, and the UK Olympic Committee, and the individual swimmers, what they want out of the sport as well. So that's going to be an interesting one, looking at where things are at with swimming. On the and on the looking at BT Sport, as we'll go back to BT Sport, there are issues with BT Sport. It's hemorrhaging viewers, it's hemorrhaging money. Whether BT decides to pull the plug on their TV side of things, they don't seem like they want to, though. They've put a lot of effort into their media side of things at BT with their sponsorship of various things, and BT TV boxes and their mobile site. BT, I think, may have overexpanded itself and overstretched itself, but I can see BT Sport restructuring and changing how it's done, possibly putting on free to air. I don't know, but BT Sport has to change its direction because it's going the wrong way. And I do think that even though some of the TV rights have been pinched by other media outlets, if BT Sport is to completely collapse, that will have a massive knock-on effect for the media industry, not just in sport, but across the board in the UK. And it would have ramifications in Ireland. It would have ramifications in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. A lot of sports teams are reliant on the TV deals that have been signed with leagues and competitions over the last few years. And if BT Sport goes, that will cause massive problems. Sky is not the network it was when it was first set up. It's not as dominant. It has weakened. The purchase by Comcast has altered the playing field. Premier Sports have now launched, as I say, Free Sports. The former terrestrial channels of Channel 4, Channel 5, ITV, and BBC are now sharing a lot of the rugby league, rugby union, and other rights. There's starting to be a pushback against this subscription TV, pay through the nose, poor quality journalism. There's a pushback. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens with BT Sport, but it's not great coverage. They have to borrow presenters from other networks just to actually get a production out. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the future holds for BT Sport, but I could not tell you what the future for BT Sport holds. But it has lost a lot of money. The BT have fired the guy who came up with the idea to go into sports TV all those years ago. Viewership is not as high as they would like. People are switching off BT Internet, which is propping up BT Sport. People aren't happy with BT as a network provider for phone and internet. Because of BT Sport struggles, it is having a knock-on effect for other parts of the business. So we'll have to see how BT look at BT Sport and whether to separate it, cut it loose, shut it down, whatever. But it is a worry if the sports network is going to struggle. But they've got 3 channels now. They've expanded to 3 channels on BT Sport, and they've got BT Sport ESPN as well. So they are still around, but ESPN are now in the hunt to get NHL rights in the next batch of sales. So we'll see what happens, but there are issues within BT Sport, and if it is to fail, it's not necessarily good for Scottish football. We saw this with Setanta. It's a risk that some of these leagues take. If they were to get out of the TV contracts and get new TV deals with Sky or Premier Sports, Free Sports, or ESPN or Eurosport, they might save themselves, but it's bleak. Hello there. But it's interesting. We got a Celtic and Aberdeen fan in the same live stream. How this is going to be interesting. But you're both moderators, and you both seem to have good banter. Obviously, the last few days I haven't solely been focused on sport as well, which has been nice to have a little break. It's been nice to have a break off YouTube for a few days. Yes, I've had some things going on outside of my control, but it was nice to take a little break and not have to worry about getting the next video out, the next live stream out. I mean, yes. I mean, it's it's like the furore around Wayne Rooney in his last cap, and you know, is he going to start? Is he going to come off the bench? You know, should he be selected? It's a friendly. I don't care. International football had a great opportunity after the World Cup to grow the game, put it on Sky. What else? They're very good at that Sky. When sport gets popular, they just we'll have that, and then kill the viewership. There's a lot of discussion about Wayne Rooney in his last cap and Steph Houghton and her 100th cap in English football, and a variety of discussion points about sport like that. England narrowly lost to the All Blacks in the Rugby Union as well. People weren't expecting that result. They were expecting the gap to be a lot bigger from the All Blacks. And there were some people who were saying England could actually win that Test match, and they really did. So there are some positive signs going forward for the World Cup next year. Yes, Aberdeen finally starting to get serious in the Scottish League, which is important. And they've obviously got the League Cup final to come later on as well. There is a real chance for silverware from Aberdeen this year. I think we regularly discuss Scottish football's troubles and the issue with competitiveness. And so far this season, the Scottish Premiership has been really unpredictable and really interesting to look at and fun because of some of these clubs that have been at the top for a long time being at the top, and Celtic and Rangers having various struggles at times. We'll have to see what happens with Celtic's European games and how much they actually affect the strength of that squad, because I do think they did get the transfer window wrong and how they dealt with it, and they didn't necessarily get that transfer window right. And the criticism that they received at the beginning of the season was justified. Absolutely was justified. In the English Premier League, Newcastle now have a win. Huddersfield now have a win. Fulham keep plummeting down the table. I am surprised that there have been no sackings in the English Premier League yet. Absolutely not a single sacking yet. I'm very, very surprised by that. Other leagues, yes, there's been more sackings, but the English Premiership, not a single sacking yet, whereas last season we already had several by this point. Very, very interesting. If you were to sack a manager now, I don't think that would be the best of timing. Transfer window doesn't open for another month and a half, so you're stuck with the squad you've got. But it is interesting looking at the managerial circus. There's a lot of speculation about a couple of managers, and all those managers under speculation, apart from Jokanovic, who had wins in the last couple of weeks and have started to get some momentum going and a bit of form going, whereas Fulham are going down. I don't know what happens to some of the other clubs around the bottom end of the table. We can look at Newcastle, we can look at Cardiff, we can look at Palace, maybe. I mean, West Ham, Huddersfield. I mean, there are some Southampton. There are some teams in the bottom of the table that are having some struggles at the moment. But I am actually surprised not a single manager has been sacked. I think the manager under the most pressure is Jokanovic and Fulham. They've spent a lot of money there, and they are struggling. And this is what I say to people: money doesn't always buy you success. Success has to be earned through hard work. Man City were hopeless for years when they had money, and then in 2011 it started to click. It took 5 years for Man City to actually get a trophy. Thoughts on Hibs? Neil Lennon is obviously a fiery character, as you would expect from a ginger. Jokes. No, Neil Lennon, he's a very, very fiery character. Hibs had a very, very good season so far. They're making it interesting in the top half of the table. Hearts making it interesting. Livingston have made it interesting. Kilmarnock, St Johnstone. No, it's more interesting and more fun this season than in previous seasons. Long may that continue. However, if Celtic are to win another title, that could prove very, very damaging for Scottish football long term because of the UEFA coefficient and their failure to qualify for the Champions League this year. I think Scottish football does need a new winner. It does need a new name on that trophy. It does need some new colours, if you think about it in that sense. Um, because of the lack of competitiveness at the top level of Scottish football, that has a damaging effect on the development of players, the quality of player coming through, and the quality of the league that is watched. Um, there's no easy fix to Scottish football, but I think if you were to get a team like Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, St Johnstone, Kilmarnock, maybe even Livingston to win a trophy this season, that will go some way into giving the Scottish football that injection that it needs of fresh kind of a new team winning, more competitive. It needs that. I'm not sure though how long Celtic can continue to be the top dog in Scotland. I don't know how long they can continue. There are some concerns with Celtic. It's going to be interesting. We've still got a long way to go. Um, there is a long, long way to go this season. There's lots of unknowns. There could be weather disruption. There could be injuries. The European campaigns could have an effect on Celtic and Rangers because they might go further than they anticipate because they are in the weaker European competition. That's going to have an effect. Um, there's a variety of things that could happen yet. Injuries, suspensions, managers could get sacked. We just don't know. In all honesty, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out. It really will. But that's where I'm going to reach out. I haven't followed it as closely over the last couple of weeks as I did at the beginning of the season. Hearts have started to slip back. Yes, Rangers did win 7-1, but they didn't get the coverage of their win. Again, an issue there of the media coverage of sport in this country and what is a balanced and fair coverage for all sports. They did get a big win, but didn't get necessarily the press coverage it could have. So again, a debating point whether the media have got the balance right again. Regularly comes up in conversation on this channel is media rights coverage and is it fair and balanced? And the answer is no, because the media in this country is either based in Manchester or London. So very Manchester centric, very London centric, and as I've noticed since BBC since the BBC has moved some of its TV operations in news and sport to Manchester, the bias of stories towards Man United and Man City has gone through the roof. It's not as balanced as it was. So I believe Celtic are now top on goal difference. They've had some wobbles in the last couple of games, and I think Celtic are now top on goal difference. I think on games won as well. I think Hearts have had more draws than Celtic. So Hearts are still in with a chance. I believe Celtic are now top on goal difference. But who's to say what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks? They might have a wobble again. They might have to play in Europe. That starts taking its toll. And they could slip back again. This is where this season's been very unpredictable. The last couple of years in sport have been more unpredictable, which is more fun. I like sport being more unpredictable. I find it more fun, much more rewarding, much more enjoyable to watch. That's what it is. We'll see if Celtic can continue this run. Let's see if Hearts can bounce back and then get through the sticky period and keep going. Hibs, they're interesting to watch. Rangers obviously have had a big win this weekend. You've got Kilmarnock in there, Johnston floating around. Aberdeen, yeah, you guys have got back into the running, and Livingston are having a rather good go of things. Teams that I'm very surprised with struggling. Motherwell, there's a team I'm really surprised on not doing as well as they were before. They have declined somewhat the last couple of years of Motherwell, and that's a concern. if they have issues going forward financially or struggling form wise, that's a concern. But I think Scottish football as a whole is not as competitive as it could be. And we can, go back to the debate about Scotland not qualifying for tournaments for 20 years, and the team they had in the 80s and the 70s being really good on paper, but in practice was poor. There are fundamental flaws within the structure of Scottish football from top to bottom. But it'll be interesting to see, if someone brave enough is brave enough and willing to go through the hurdles to restructure the sport from top to bottom. That's going to be interesting to see if the SFA are willing to restructure where it's necessary. And there's a lot of restructuring that is needed. Plain and simple, a lot of restructuring in Scottish football that is needed, and it's whether you can get that individual organisation to be willing to go through the painful process of restructuring for long-term gain. Hello, Hornet. It's been a while since I've seen you. It's good to see you still floating around on the channel. Although admittedly I will be going, finishing the stream in about 10 minutes. I got to get some sleep and got to get some food, actually. Had a very, very long weekend, and not in a good way, but a lack of sleep and feeling it a little bit now. But no, it's, if I was to do as I'm going to say, I'm going to do a snapshot of the Scottish Premier League on the eve of the transfer window, and see where teams are at, and see how close it is at the top. Exceptionally close to the top of the league at the moment, with a lot of sides, which is good to see for the first time in a while. Let's see how long that congestion in the top half of the table can continue, because that ultimately is a good thing. Yes, the Gerrard effect. There are some who I've seen on this channel in comments and on the live streams that do have some concerns that Gerrard may not be there long term, and could have the same issues that Pedro Caixinha and Graham Murray have had, and Warburton have had. There are still issues off the field with Rangers, obviously money wise. They're still not financially as stable as people realise. There's still an issue with that football club behind the scenes, and that is hampering investment and getting loans and getting investment. And because of the history of what's gone on there, there are still some outstanding issues long term with Rangers. Whether Gerrard can be a long term manager there, or he just cuts his teeth, is up for debate. We'll have to see what happens with Gerrard going forward. No need to apologise for being busy. I mean, I've not been online for a few days. I've obviously had things that are outside of my control sort of take over, and it's been a very long weekend, and a very stressful weekend. But hey, we're still plodding along. No need to apologise. But no, yeah, all told, the Scottish Premiership this season is nice to see it, with a lot of names at the top of the table, all really close together, rather than just Celtic and then a gap to Aberdeen and then a massive gap to the rest. It's nice to see a good mix of teams fighting from first to about eighth. It's really good to see. Now, if that can continue till the end of the season, great. I would expect to see some kind of separation between clubs at some point. But then again, as last year proven in several leagues and the seasons before that, the last couple of seasons in football, rugby union, rugby league, the NHL, unpredictability have been a big thing. I think sports becoming more unpredictable in the last couple of years. I think there is a bit more parity coming into some leagues now and some sports now, but we shall see what happens going forward. We'll see, if that kind of competitive nature at the top end of the league can continue. And let's hope it does. The longer it does, the better, I think, the second half of the season will be. If teams start dropping off now, I think that, could pose a problem for Scottish football again. They need to try and keep that compete level between all the sides, first to about 9th, 10th, even the whole league. I think there is a concern that, Scottish football's not been competitive for a very long time. But no, it is good to see it, though. Continue on the football theme of things for the next 5 or so minutes. Obviously, with this collapse of the sale of Wembley, There have been those calling for restructuring of the way agents' fees work and taxed and governed. There's a big grey area with agents' fees and transfers. Big grey area. There are also calls for salary caps and wage caps and transfer caps. So that money that these clubs have gets pumped into their youth systems. There are concerns that some clubs are struggling to recruit youth players because bigger clubs with more financial clout can pinch them. Everton have been caught out again um, with tapping up a youth player. Um, oh, right. This headset, I noticed there was an issue with the microphone just cutting out at intermittent points every minute and a half, 2 minutes throughout longer videos. And also, it's not the most comfortable to wear, and the power cable going down there, it's a pain in the ass. The Premier League clubs being asked to give £250,000 each so he can get a nice big fat pension fund. Richard Scudamore has done more to damage this game in this country than help the game. He had that plan, that extra game in the US for each club to play a game abroad in the US, which was very quickly dropped, by the way. He's earned far too much. The Premier League hasn't necessarily delivered the dividends we were promised all those years ago. Now, he hasn't been in charge of the Premier League the entire time the Premier League has been going. I will mention that. Richard Scudamore hasn't been the chief executive of the Premier League for the entire time. But he's presided over the most greedy period of football ever, the greediest period of football ever. The flouting of financial fair play, the failure of several World Cup and Euros bids, a failure on a variety of levels on discrimination against minority groups. Uh, you know, fans feeling outpriced, and if we have to give up another, we were always told that ticket prices would stay low because of the TV deal and all the money coming in for all these new sponsors and more professional league. Look at ticket prices at the top level, unsustainable. Fans who travel to games from far afield, it's unsustainable. Travel costs not taken into account by the FA or the Premier League or the Football League. Clubs, they don't care about fans really. The fact that agents' fees is a big talking point. There's concern about agents' fees being, unregulated. There are concerns about some of these transfers being obscene, financial fair play, fit and proper persons test. A lot of fans are very, very unhappy. The TV rights deal really stinks. There's some real things that I think Scudamore has failed. The lack of free-to-air coverage of the league. From top to bottom, actually, is quite disturbing. From the Premier League all the way down to Football League, National League levels, they missed a trick here. The lack of English players in the Premier League and Welsh players, because obviously there's Welsh clubs involved in the Football League system as well. The lack of young managers coming through. Issues within with Huddersfield having to shut their academy and getting no support, none, to keep it open. When Everton are tapping up players at youth level from then Championship clubs, no action taken to support a Premier League club there, none. Portsmouth ending up the situation they ended up in with some criminal activity going on there, failure there. There's been a failure to look at where the money goes. The fact that the football clubs could let us in for free or for very, very little with this current TV deal and the new one just as much. The bungling of the sale of TV rights with games going unsold. Yeah, it's good one. Yeah, he's a right tit. We are getting someone who's been a female in charge of the Premier League, because that's going to be interesting to see how she does it. Will all the cheerleaders get fired? Because I wouldn't be surprised if she wants to get rid of the cheerleaders. Sometimes that's the most interesting thing at games is the non-match entertainment, because some games are poor. The quality level isn't actually great on a weekend. Very few games are high quality. There are things that he's leaving that are broken that need fixing. Oh yeah, you've missed I'm not going back over Scottish football, but yes, you missed the talk on Scottish football. Yeah, you missed that. Not that it was very interesting. I might be on Xbox later. I've already been on GTA Online today. I might go back online. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be in yet. I might be going back out, so I don't know about Xbox tonight. But yes, you missed the Scottish football talk. No, Peter Scudamore. No, I don't think. Or Richard Scudamore. Peter Scudamore was a jockey. Oh, there's too many Scudamores. No, Richard Scudamore doesn't deserve that money. Why should clubs be forced to give him money? The Premier League makes enough money off us, the fans, which basically means somehow these clubs are going to have to break all that revenue back. No, there are. Scudamore does leave a lot of issues unresolved. Like, what is going to happen with VAR? We know it's going to be experimented on at some point the next year. Um, you know, how long have I been into sports? All my life, since what I say, 91, 92, when I was a toddler. My dad being an ex non-league football player and played football for the army and rugby for the army as well. Both my granddads, well, my dad and my granddad, both played amateur levels athletics and sport. My other granddad played non-league football as well, so I'm from a sporty family. That's a simple way of looking at it. You know, yeah, but my dad played non-league football. My granddad played non-league football for a while. My other granddad played hockey for field hockey, days, not ice hockey for England and athletics as well. Um, uh, I also, got a few mates who are professional sportsmen, so I've been around sport a very, very long time, and I'm being very fortunate that I'm not a million miles away from a lot of sports teams around, be it amateur or semi-pro professional level in this country. So I'm kind of lucky where I live that there is easy access to a variety of sports at various levels to watch or participate in. That's not always the case for people around the world, but I'm reasonably lucky with my background and where I went to school and a few other bits and pieces. Had I been born the next day, I may not have had all this, but I suppose I've been reasonably lucky with, I suppose, the background I've had. Um, and I've played a bit of sport. I played for my local rugby club and played for my school, and had a few injuries. And I've decided, at the moment I've got a few health issues. I mean, I can't play rugby again. If I have another concussion or another neck or shoulder injury, I'm in serious trouble. Which is a shame because I used to enjoy playing rugby and I used to enjoy the physical side of the game even as a smaller player. But yeah, it's not as how do I get into it? It's a long story. You'd have to go back to look at some of my earlier videos that aren't to do with sport. Yes, I wasn't always a sports based channel. I have two channels, but basically in the beginning it was more of a personal vlog. I was in a bit of a shit place at the time, and ended up doing a vlog, and I ended up looking at the newspaper one day, and Neymar had got transferred to PSG, and I had a rant about it, and people started watching it. I realised people are more interested in sport than listening to me grumble about my shit life. And it went from there, and then the Rugby League World Cup came along, and that was really popular with people around the world. So I did videos on that, and then we've ended up where we are today with about 12 different playlists and over 300 odd subs, and having battles with monetization and demonetization. But it's sort of a natural, accidental progression to where we are. It is what it is. There was no real plan to do this. It just happened, and then it sort of snowballed and ended up where we are. How much money the FA gives to a team? The prize money, it goes up round and round. Some clubs can get a lot of prize money out of it. The FA Cup winners get a lot of prize money. It's the TV and ticket sales, and there's a variety of things in place that just generate how much prize money teams get and how far they get, and what even the teams that bow out still get some revenue from it. Ticket sales, shirt sales, program sales, match night ticket sales. It's an interesting one. What position do I play in rugby? Position I played in rugby, I was a winger, I was a fullback, I was a inside centre, outside centre. Played a bit of number 8, played a bit of second row, flanker. I basically played everywhere until I realised playing out on the wing or fullback was my position. But I did a bit of scrum half, did a bit of fly half, outside centre. more of a utility player to begin with at school, and then when I got older, I was a winger fullback. That's where I stuck to play. That's where I ended up playing. Was on the wing and fullback, and then I did my ankle in, and that was that. But I've had a few concussions and a few neck and shoulder injuries, and still having issues now, years later. So I'm not going to go back and play. Basically, I still watch, and I still shudder sometimes. Players, I can know when a player's concussed. This is why I really argue about the the concussion protocols and head hits in sport. Um, but there we go. Yeah, I don't know how they work out the prize money per round or whatever teams make per round. I don't know how the DFA work that out. It's not necessarily the most easiest, simple system to understand how they work it out. Um, I think honestly, I don't know how they work out the prize money per round, or is it to do with the way you play the games, how much you made through ticket sales will have something to do with it. The TV rights will have something to do with it as well. Obviously, match night sales of food, drink, and scarves and a variety of things there. I think it does vary from match to match as well. There's no set formula of like, if you get this round, this is how much you make, a quarter of a million per round. Or something. I don't know. Newcastle, yeah, they've started to dig themselves out of a hole. I still have a lot of concerns going forward for the whole season. Um, I think the big sticking point is what's going to happen in the transfer window and what's going to happen over I would say the next month or so, because Benitez has hinted that if it's not with it, because he's obviously having meetings to do with getting players in. He has stated if he isn't given the financial backing to get signings done, he will walk. Simple. Um, right. Okay. Let's have a look at this. Now, Mike, you obviously know more about how the FA works. Things out when it comes to prize money for cup competitions. I don't have enough knowledge on how they break down, but it seems, yeah, from what you're saying, non-league teams get a 10% more revenue for tickets than league teams. At the end of the day, they should just have bans. If you get the first round proper, you get X amount. Second round, X amount. Third round, X amount. Same for all the qualifying rounds for non-league teams as well. I think the, they've got to work out some kind of formula for prize money, like similar to a funding formula. The further you get, the more you get. I think that's plain and simple, really. I think you should base a minimum amount of getting to that round plus ticket sales on top. Plain and simple. Um, no, I didn't see Dortmund versus Bayern. Unfortunately, again, it's to do with the TV rights. It's to do with the accessibility. And I've also taken a few days off YouTube for personal reasons. There's been things going on, so I haven't actually been on my laptop and I haven't been hammering the sports news as much. Accessibility is a big thing. Now, we're talking a lot about German football this season because there's English players playing in Germany doing well. And Bayern Munich are starting to decline, which is great for German football. Not so good for the national side because they're so reliant on Bayern players. But Germany, I think German league needs a new name on that trophy. Bayern have, much like Scotland, not as competitive a league. And to see other teams doing really well and mixing it up is good to see and refreshing. For so long, it's been Bayern's league and it's been boring. Well, I stopped watching the Bundesliga quite some time ago. I used to enjoy watching Bundesliga football now, not so much because of the dominance Bayern have had over the last decade, with only Wolfsburg and Dortmund getting those odd wins there in the league in the last decade. God, I was actually going to finish my live stream now as well. I'm running here. But no, the issue with how the FA Cup structures its prize money, it needs to again simplify, make it easier and more open. I think. Yeah, I think the Bundesliga, much like the French league and the Scottish league, and to some extent the Spanish and Italian leagues, it's become less competitive over the last decade or so, which is really, really a shame because this is why I like football in the 90s and early 2000s. Domestic football was really interesting to watch then across Europe because multiple teams are winning stuff. And in the last decade, not so. And it's been a shame. But football in general has got a lot of issues across the board, and I do think a salary cap, some kind of spending cap, has to come in to keep it sustainable. We're seeing clubs at lower levels struggle financially, day in, day out. Financial fair play clearly being breached by PSG, Monaco, Man City, Wolves, not getting punished. We've only seen a couple of high-profile punishments. I think AC Milan's the most high-profile, and even then, it's negligible punishment. Um, so we are seeing football reach a crossroads now. We've seen with La Liga wanting to take games to the US, the backlash they have faced. And you may hate the French League. The French League is dull because it's PSG have bought the league for an indefinite period. Um, and yes, PSG are the most successful team in French history, but it doesn't matter on that. The way that the French league have allowed PSG to basically a subsidiary of some, I think, Kuwaiti or Saudi or Emirate kind of prince. It's not right. Um, you should be successful through hard work, not through buying it. Just buying it, basically. That's basically what some of these leagues have become. It's just we're wealthy, you're less wealthy. We're going to keep you less wealthy and less competitive, and we're going to try and win the league as much as possible. Oh yeah, no, this is what's happened to Scottish football. Is it's been uncompetitive for so long, hence why the national side is struggling. Bayern dominating German football for so long. I think again you got to look. The German team's starting to struggle again. Spanish team didn't do well at the World Cup, uncompetitive league. Italy not qualifying for the World Cup, uncompetitive league. The French, yes, they won the World Cup, but a lot of the French players don't play in France. So there you go. A lot of the French players play outside of France and play very, very well. I didn't do a video specifically on the Super League leak. I've had a lot of things going on away from the channel. A good friend of mine, his aunt passed away yesterday, and I've been helping out the family. The last few days of this weekend has been very, very hectic and emotional, and I haven't been really on the internet. I've been sort of taking a bit of a break from YouTube. I was getting a bit stressed with it. The Super League leak itself, it'll be a dead league. No one's going to want to watch it. We've seen this in Australia with the Super League wars in rugby league. The Super League idea and the NRL idea, it didn't work out. Hence why we have the NRL in Australia in rugby league. They tried a rival league, it didn't work. It failed. Fans didn't turn up. They didn't understand it. They weren't happy with it. There was a traditional breakdown. A lot of players were seen as outcasts. No, if they would do that, it wouldn't work. We've seen it fail time and time again when you take this Super League idea, it's the established league or the established structures, and basically giving two fingers to that, and they will basically ostracize themselves, damage their image, damage those clubs involved, could harm the game more. Yeah, I hope it doesn't happen. The fact that football's under great scrutiny, the governance of football's under even greater scrutiny now since post Sepp Blatter, and now with the allegations of financial fair play being breached, and Infantino assisting in that breach and covering it up and getting around it, it doesn't look good for a sport when there's constant governance issues, and the top level of the sport seems so elitist now and so overpaid and unaccessible for fans. And I think they are going down the wrong path with football. But one of the reasons why I don't care as much, I'm really starting to lose love for the sport, and I know the amount of videos I've done on football is the most on this channel. Yes, I've done the most football videos on this channel. Most popular video playlist. A lot of football videos. Covered the World Cup like mad. I think I didn't cover 4 games in the World Cup. So what gets me though is it's the world's most popular sport, and it's the world's most mismanaged sport. The amount of money floating around, why are clubs bust? Why, are we not having this technology with VAR? How is it possible that a sport so global has so many issues, corruption issues all over the place, match fixing all over the place, um, issues with national teams and national players not getting paid at tournaments? How is it that the wealthiest sport in the world is failing so miserably? Bayern are like Man United, end of an era. They've had a very, very good couple of decades where they took advantage of changing structure of Champions League and things like that, much like Man United. The 90s came along at the right time for Bayern, and they've had 20 odd, 25 odd, 30 odd years of reasonable, consistent success. They're not always going to be successful. Fans have got to realise that their team is not going to win every year. and a lot of fans have got it in this superiority complex because they've won so much that they're indefeatable, undefeatable. They take other teams for granted. When they actually do lose, it's embarrassing. Man United, yeah, Man United have been declining for a long time. Bayern are going to start this decline as well, um, and it's good sometimes to see an overly successful team just go down the toilet. It sometimes is refreshing to see some new teams get to the top and start winning trophies. And people forget a lot of them, Man United fans weren't even alive between 67 and 92. They won nothing league wise. They won no league titles, a couple of FA Cups in there, not a lot else. They even went down to the second tier of English football. So United they went through a 30-year period of being crap. And United fans would rather, the hardcore United fans know that, but most United fans born in the Ferguson era don't realise the past, see all the success, expect success every year, doesn't happen, want manager sacked. The fact Mourinho is crap and has made that team worse is another story altogether. But yeah, you're not going to win every year. Sport is great like this, ebbs and flows like that. Look at Athletic Bilbao in Spain. They've never been relegated from La Liga, in the bottom four, struggling to stay out of the relegation zone. Used to have brilliant teams, got the European finals, cup finals. Look at them now. Fourth most successful team in Spanish history, struggling to avoid the drop to the second tier for the first time ever. Oh yeah, no, I do urge you guys to check out a guy called Declan Hill. He is an undercover reporter and a university lecturer, and he's uncovered a lot about sport. And you have to watch his interviews, his documentaries, read his book. It's called The Fix. He's got several books out. He is a very intelligent man. Wears a funny bow tie with glasses, so he looks a little bit obscene. But there's a book he's written, Declan Hill, and it's called The Fix. So just bear that in mind. The Fix by Declan Hill. I suggest you read it, and also type his name in and type in Declan Hill match fixing, whatever it may be on YouTube, and you'll find a host of documentaries and seminars he does, and it is really interesting watching him give his seminars and also his interviews about how he did what he did in undercover journalism. He nearly got murdered multiple times. He met the Russian mafia, he met the Indian mafia, he went to Singapore, met the triads. He really went into the deep underbelly of organised crime and the links with sport and match fixing and betting and spot fixing and corrupt dealings for contracts and a variety of things. And he really uncovers a lot, and he's still uncovering more. And it all started because a friend of his was doing some reporting in Canada about corruption in sport in Canada, and it ended up exploding. And I recommend you read, just type in Declan Hill, author, journalist, and he'll have a list of his publications. Some of them are more for university courses and in journalism and governance, but his regular sale books about himself and his actions doing undercover reporting and uncovering all these things, really, really interesting and eye-opening. I've seen a lot of his content on YouTube. I've read a lot of his articles. I've read a lot of articles about him. It is exceptionally interesting what he has to say and how worrying it is for the integrity of so many sports around the world. And the only country with a dedicated police unit to tackle corruption sport is Australia. Only country, Australia. Other police forces have to ask this Australian unit for advice when it comes to corruption in sport, with a sports official taking bribes or match fixing. They actually have to phone up the Australian police force and go, by the way, what advice will you give us in this investigation? It's mad. Absolutely mad. And I will say this: sport over the last couple of years has been exceptionally unpredictable. But when I did my World Cup predictions and I looked at the World Cup in Russia this summer, I did say not a single South American side would make it past the quarterfinals, and I was proven correct. I also said an all-European final, and I was proven correct. So the only two predictions I got right about the World Cup, I got two predictions right, were there was no South American teams post quarterfinals and an all European final, and I got those two predictions right. Monaco, yeah, they've had their struggles in the past. They have been relegated before from the French top league. They've also breached financial fair play, just not as much as PSG, so they haven't really reached the radar as much, but they're still pretty corrupt. Yeah, the French league is just it really does need massive structural reform in the French league because they've allowed PSG to Lyon basically dominated it for a decade. And now it's PSG's turn to dominate it for a generation, and that's bad. The fact the French managed to win a World Cup with an average squad surprises even me, but they did. But we French football has declined domestically. Internationally, yeah, they do have a lot of decent players floating around, but I don't see this French side being is actually as good as people realise. It's not actually as good as people think it is. It's not the greatest side. It just happened to win the World Cup. I think work ethic was more to do with it than actual skill. But apart from they were playing a Croatian team that had played a lot of extra time and penalties as well, and had done a lot more running around. Had that Croatian team not had to go through extra time with England, and not have to go through extra time with I think was it Russia or something like that, and not have to go through all those penalty shootouts, they would have beaten that French team in the final. Brazil were hopeless. Brazil were overrated. Neymar is overrated. Their defense is shaky. Um, I would say Brazil. People are going by Brazil's reputation rather than the actual team they have now. South American football isn't the South American football it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Very few South American-based players make it to the World Cup these days. They get lured by the bigger money of Europe, not necessarily the better football of Europe, but the bigger money of Europe, and it has a detrimental impact on the domestic leagues in South America. Some of the skill level and the technical ability of these players in South America is unbelievable, but the money just isn't necessarily there. And there's a lot of economic issues right now and social issues, should I say, in South America right now, political and social and military issues in South America. Corruption is a big issue, and they see the bright lights of Europe. They go to the European leagues, and yeah, I think it would be nice to see more South American-based players playing at international tournaments. It really would, but this isn't the 80s anymore. This isn't the 70s anymore. Um, you know, the sport's evolved. I do remember you. Yes, you are the e-gamer. You keep popping up, so good to see you again. I wouldn't say this World Cup this year was entertaining. I will say that. As the tournament progressed, I think Belgium let slip a great opportunity to win their first international title. They really did. I think England overachieved massively, yes, but it's something to build upon. Croatia, their best performance at a tournament ever. The French, I wouldn't say got lucky. They just bumbled their way through. They were a very average side that just got through to the final and managed to win the final with a couple of good performances along the way. But for the most part, they played the most boring game in World Cup history I've ever seen against Denmark, which was like taking Valium. About as interesting as staring at my big toe was that game, but that was the only game with no goals. There was less draws than I thought as well. Goal scoring was massively up. Set play goals were up. Corners were up. Free kicks were up. I think the VAR had an effect on that. Penalties went through the roof. Definitely VAR had an effect on that. There was some interesting things about it. I think the quality of stadiums was very good. The quality of pitches was actually surprisingly good as well, considering the range of geographical locations that the Russian World Cup was covering as well. That was really good to see that a lot of the pitches held up very well. We weren't having a discussion about the ball moving all over the place. It was a pretty decent ball. There was no real complaints about the quality of the footballs. The biggest talking point was, I think, the VAR. And I think it worked, I would say 92% effectiveness, 85, 90% effectiveness, something like that. It wasn't perfect. It was a trial system. It worked reasonably well. Improvements are needed. There were a couple of controversial calls with that. But for the most part, I think, yeah, it was a very good tournament. Well organised, well played. I think the fact the Russians got through in the way they got through to the quarterfinals was important for the tournament. Again, not a very good Russian side, but I think that first game they played very well and scored some very good goals. And there were some really good goals scored in the tournament. I was just surprised that when I was doing all my videos and covering the tournament, not as many people watch the videos as the Rugby League World Cup. I think it's showing a trend towards other tournaments and other sports getting to that top level. Oh yeah, Charlie Austin's comments are brilliant though. The way he basically sums it up in a nutshell is right. And if you were to get, I think it was Watford they were playing. If you were to get a Watford player in there as well, who was allowed to speak his mind, hadn't been overly coached and had to do with the media. If he had a Watford player in there as well, I think he would say exactly the same thing about the missed calls for them as well. Um, it wasn't just that Southampton had a bad decision in that game. Both sides had bad decisions, but his Charlie Austin's interview is just putting it bluntly. It's basically what every football fan is thinking right now. Is the quality of officiating is not as good as it could be, and I could mention this on a variety of sports. I haven't done my ice hockey review because I had to go basically back out and do other things after the game. But the quality of refereeing in the ice hockey this weekend that I went to at Bracknell was poor. Um, so it doesn't matter what level of sport you're playing at. The officiating's got to be up to the same level as the players and the quality of the play on the field or on the ice or in the arena. If the playing quality is there, but the officiating quality isn't, it actually is not so good. Um, you could be having a low quality game with a high quality official. Officiating is important, and Charlie Austin was right. You know, it's the way he goes standard. It was quite funny, but it is funny to watch him rant. But if you actually look at what he's saying, it is important. You know, he is saying these officials do need help. He's saying, he's not completely slagging them off, but he is saying mistakes are being made here, you know, that shouldn't be made and wouldn't happen with VAR and the right interpretation. It does need to be done right. I do admit that. There are some concerns I do have about the video assistant referee, but why is football so far behind lots of other team sports and individual sports and that use technology very, very effectively in officiating or assisting the sport flow or the game flow, whatever it is, rugby union, rugby league, cricket use it, ice hockey use it at the top level in the NHL, etc. You know, why is it football, another team sport, why is football lagging behind? Um, yeah, again, I don't know why they didn't wait for the World Cup to conclude and look at the data that had been collected and look at how it performed and look at the good and the bad. Very, very silly to take the vote before a tournament that was using it. I know they're fudging it now. I don't understand that. I think the way that the sport has tried, to get this in, I think Sepp Blatter was very resistant for so long, but we now know how crooked he was because he was taking bribes. Um, Obviously, they took the vote after the failure of the A-League Grand Final in Australia. That's when the vote was taken just after the failure in a major final. Yes, the A-League is not the top quality league in the world, but it was a major final for that particular competition. It did fail. The referee had to go by his judgment, going, I'm not 100% certain, but hey, we'll give the goal. We'll use common sense. So the A-League Grand Final failed before the World Cup. That would have obviously been seen by the FA and the Premier League. They'd also looked at how it performed in the FA Cup last season, and I thought it worked well. Did it work? Yes, no. There were some good games, some bad games. Um, Honestly, it's failed properly when it should have worked once, but it's completely failed, and that was in the A-League Grand Final. And the A-League chairman, the Australian version of Richard Scudamore, went on live TV as soon as the final whistle went and go, "We fucked up." He basically admitted, "Yeah, it's worked all season apart from now, the most important game of the season in our domestic competition." And he basically admitted, "Yeah, we screwed up." Um, but again, the World Cup was a very, very good test for it at the highest level. And they decided to put the vote beforehand. Yeah, the FA and the Premier League are really stupid there. All these Premier League clubs screaming to bring the transfer window forward, and it hasn't fully worked how they envisaged. They want it pushed back again, but hey, they've made a vote, they've agreed on it. It's staying because they're throwing the toys out the pram, and all the clubs that are whinging, all those clubs that fail to get any players in the transfer window, were some of the most vocal would bring it forward. Um, I do think there are issues within the game. The fact that it's taken this long to get technology involved is a shambles, and the fact that there's no unified policy at the top level around the world is a shambles. So I'm running out of time with football, to be honest. With its poor governance, um, and the poor implementation of rule changes, and the fact that FIFA financial fair play and fit and proper persons tests are just like a joke. I could buy a football club. I could go, look, I'm basically broke, but I'm going to buy a football club because I haven't got any debt. It's basically, I've got about £1,000 to my name. I could probably buy Yeovil's Hound, and they would probably go, yeah, it's all right. He's got money. Asset strip the club, make myself some money, flog it off. That's basically what I could do. That's how the fit and proper persons test work. Yeah, I could just buy the football club. I don't know what happens in January. Some some managers may not be there by January. I don't know. I think the transfer window and how transfers are done, agents' fees need to be looked at. We could discuss if having the January window is a good thing or a bad thing, or whether you should just have an all year round transfer market, or transfer deadline where you can have transfers through the season up to a point, like other sports do, where they have a trade deadline and they cut off. I I can see some panic buys from some clubs. I can see some really bad buys by some clubs, and I can see some very shrewd uh, transfers by some clubs. But the whole system needs to change. It really does. Um, it's overinflated, so clubs are overspending. Agents' fees and the role of agents is again a hot topic for debate, and what their role is in all this. And players' wages and some of the deals they sign are obscene, absolutely obscene amounts of money. More damaging for the game than good long term. There is a lot of problems within football going forward. Absolutely. The window, I don't know. It depends what players are available, actually, and what kind of offers are put in. I wouldn't be surprised if players like Jack Grealish, for example, who play in the Championship, who should be playing in the Premier League, get snapped up as well. There's a few Championship players that I'm looking at and going, they could be sold. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I wouldn't be surprised if, especially at the bottom of the table, a lot of money is thrown around. I wouldn't be surprised if some club transfer records are broken. Um, but we'll have to see what happens. I think the it's going to be interesting. It's been a very, very interesting window, but we've got a month and a half before that even kicks off yet. There's a lot to look forward to. We haven't had any managerial sackings yet, so to really discuss the transfer window, we haven't even got through November yet. No Premier League sackings yet, which is amazing. How Jokanovic still has a job, I don't know. How Warnock still has a job, I don't know. How Mark Hughes still has a job, I don't know. There are some clubs that I don't understand how they still have the same manager in charge because the form isn't there. But it's what it is. But yeah, no, the transfer window and the transfer market, there definitely needs to be some way of looking at it, and restructuring it, or looking at putting a transfer cap in place, saying you cannot, players not worth more than this. It's overinflated. Clubs have been forced to over. Oh God, Notts County. Well, why am I not? This is a club that is destined to fail, isn't it? If you look at all the clubs that were relegated from the various leagues last year in the professional Premier League to League Two, all the clubs that got relegated had multiple manager appointments in a season. So I'm not surprised they're at the wrong end of the football league. They just have no. I don't know what the plan is at Notts County. I really don't. That's a lot of compensation they're paying out, money they can't afford because the club is basically broke. So I don't understand this hire and fire mentality. You just go with the manager and stick with them for the year. Seriously, the manager turnover in football has got to a point where the average manager, I think, is 6 months to a year in a job. Um, I Yeah, I don't. Some managers are given time. Other managers aren't given the financial backing. Um, some managers are told get success and win now, or get sacked. So even if you win trophies, you get sacked. Look at Conte at Chelsea. Look at Mourinho. Or Mourinho is a different kettle of fish. But look at Conte at Chelsea. Wins them 2 trophies in 2 years and gets fired. So even when you give them silverware or give them the league position they want, it's not good enough. I think some of these owners are just demanding instant success, and it just doesn't happen like that. It takes time. It takes work ethic, hard work, unity, not just here's some money, win. It doesn't work like that. It takes a while to build a culture, a philosophy, a direction. And I do worry about Notts County, but we've seen a fair few managerial departures after the FA Cup first round this weekend. A lot of departures. I think AFC Wimbledon parted company with their manager, even though they won that game against Haringey Borough. Managers left. There's I think 3 or 4 managerial changes this weekend, and if I'm honest, this is why there's not enough young coaches willing to get involved in the game, because there's no job security. You've got a family to provide for. You've got, yeah, Shrewsbury, Swindon. There's a few of them. This is why football coaching, football management isn't a guaranteed job. You can get all those coaching badges, and as a player, you're obviously guaranteed to play or get paid. As a manager, you're not guaranteed work, and this is a problem. This is why there's a lack of English. This is why there's a lack of managers out of ex-players. This is why a lot of ex-players go into other industries after they retire, or struggle after they retire, because they know there's no job security in coaching or management. There isn't any. It's gone. It's not like it used to be. The managerial turnaround is stupid. It's mad. And there's a reason why these clubs are struggling. Shrewsbury overachieved last year, fell away towards the end of the season. Were top dogs in League One all season towards the end. Blackburn and Wigan overtook them. They finished third. They missed out on the playoffs. They're now struggling in League One, where they were the season before. They were a win now team. They've fallen flat. Manager gets sacked. Swindon been struggling for a while. I don't know what else to say, really. I mean, some of these teams have been struggling for some time. Other teams had a decent season the season before. Much was expected this year. They haven't quite been able to kick on because it was a win now kind of set up there. I don't know. I don't know how sustainable this managerial merry-go-round is going to be long term. Other leagues are pretty bad as well. I think football in general is got to a point now where managerial turnarounds is just the culture of the sport is, and I think average an average manager lasts 6 to 9 months now. So the average managerial kind of life expectancy isn't long. That's not long enough to get a philosophy and a direction and your voice across. It's just there's no time anymore. It's always this win now mentality, and some of these owners are a bit deluded, and some of the managers I feel very, very sorry for, but it's the way it is. Even the fans are starting to become a little bit more cynical about managers now, saying he deserves to be sacked. It's like, no, I think it'll be interesting to see, how long this can continue. Thoughts on Billericay Town? I've got family living in Billericay. I think I've been to their ground, but I don't know enough about them to really have an opinion. Mike Talks Football would probably be the best bet to ask about Billericay Town. I don't know enough about the non-league. Right, okay. I'm going to have to call it a night because I can smell food. So, thank you very much, guys, for asking all the questions and being really interesting. A lot of football discussion tonight. Other sports have been dropped in there, which is always good to see. But I understand why the footballing questions have been asked, and it's nice to see all those questions come. Great. I appreciate all your questions and all your input, as always. So we'll see what happens in the week. We'll have to do some videos in the week on a variety of topics. And officiating and refereeing is definitely one of the topics that I'm going to be looking at. And why is there such inconsistency at the highest elite level of sport in officiating? That's something to look at. I've been looking at that. I've done a video before last year. I'm going to follow that and go, it's still the same. There are still inconsistencies. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. I'll have some more videos for you soon. Really appreciate it, guys. Good night for now.